Right, bonjour. Welcome to this session looking at numbers and calendar. It's going to be in two parts. So I'm going to start with numbers, and we're going to look at them all the way from 0 through to 100. So they're activities for early, lower and upper primary here. So let's start with a bit of a warm-up. If I was doing this with the group, give one, get one. So the idea is you note one thing down and then you have to share it with other people and you get one back. So you end up with a list. So how do you use numbers every day in your classroom? Not just in French, but just different ways. So pause the video and note your ideas. So hopefully you've got lots down, things like counting the number of learners present for the day, counting learners for different types of lunches, school lunches and different choices, counting learners into groups, counting number of books that you hand out, for instance, telling the time, saying how long something's going to take. These are all things that you could do in another language as well, once you've taught them the vocabulary. And that's how we can embed languages in daily routines. So let's start off with the numbers 1 to 12. I'll just go through how we say them. So 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12. So it can be useful to use fingers or to maybe use flashcards to help and give a visual. Always try and introduce with a sound and an image or a movement. So you've got that VAK, visual audio kinesthetic approach to learning to be inclusive of everybody. I've put a little link here online to the French Minute, and there's somebody saying the words, so you can use little video excerpts like that, particularly if you're not confident with the pronunciation. In terms of younger learners in primary, particularly in early, you'll be teaching them 1 to 10 in English in P1, so that's an ideal opportunity to then do that in French. And a lot of the same activities that you do to teach the teacher in English can then be used in French. So getting them to order like bottle lids that you've maybe written the numbers on, or order wee cards, numbers 1 to 10, that you might have. And with older learners, you might have the written word so that they're matching up and reading the word with the digit. You might play games where they have to find the number, so you might say it, and then they might have to find that number, for instance, one of their cards, or they might write it on a wee whiteboard. It's also just good just to practice counting things, whatever that is. So it might be items like pasta that you might have, and you can get them to guess how many they're in a jar. So that's working on their maths, their estimation. Okay, you might count things around the classroom, like puppets, for instance, or pens, or Lego. So it doesn't really matter what it is, just practicing counting. I like to get the children to make a number tower, 1, 2, 3, going up to 10 and coming back down again. And you might have them write, make a display of numbers and create posters with different numbers on. So lots of practice of listening. You might play fly swat game where they have to find the word on the board and hit it with a fly swat or their hand. So they're listening to the number. And then you might move that forward to getting them saying the number. So like 11 assassin, they might be having to say 1, 2 or 3 numbers, so they're trying to avoid saying 11. So I might say 1, the next person might say 2, 3, 4, the next person might say 5, 6. So you're counting up and they're having to listen and work out when they get to 11. So they try not to say it, try and avoid it. We can also play higher and lower. So plus, more, plus, right? Like the plus sign for maths, and lower, moins, like the minus sign. Children don't need to learn those words, but you can just teach them, and then you can say, they can guess a word, try and guess your number. So if I've chosen a number, you then try and guess it. If they get it wrong, I would say plus ou moins, yeah, up, more or less. And then they're practicing saying the word, but they're doing it through a game, and it's also more or less, so using those math skills. So trying to bring it in with the maths if you can. Okay, other games, some brain gym, using Kim's game, using a PowerPoint, or using flashcards stuck to the board. So you can say the instructions in English if you like. So everyone look at the numbers, close your eyes, and then take one away, open your eyes, and what's missing. Or we can do it in French. Fermez les yeux, ouvrez les yeux, qu'est-ce qui manque? Ordering them. So for instance, here you might say to the children, right, can you see if you can remember the order of the numbers? So on that top line or that bottom line, 5 numbers, what are they in what order? Give them a little bit of time and then cover them up, take the flashcards off the board, for instance, and then the children, maybe in a group, have to see if they can remember the order and put them in the right order. So you can see their progression, trying to remember one number, trying to remember different numbers. And then in this activity, they're practicing saying the numbers. So initially, children will be talking and listening, and we'll move that on to reading and writing as they get further up through primary. Another way to progress the learning is to take the individual word and then to put it in a context. So instead of just learning the number, they might learn how to say how old they are. So they're learning a structure here. Quel âge tu as? Quel âge as-tu? Same question, 2 different ways of saying it. Both are absolutely fine. Quel âge as-tu? It's probably more traditional. It's probably what you were taught. Quel âge tu as? Perhaps a little less informal, more what people would say. The answer, j'ai, I have, j'ai 12 ans. So ans being years. So I have however many number of years. So j'ai 12 ans, j'ai 3 ans, j'ai 5 ans. So once you've taught them the numbers 1 to 10 or 12, for instance, then the children in primary can say their age. Put a couple of examples here of activities you could do using little excerpts from the internet. So animals saying their age. So again, you could have, younger pupils can have soft cuddly toys or puppets, and they can have different ages, and you have to try to work them out. And the teacher could say the words, that familiarization with the teacher's voice, moving on to listening to other people as they move through primary. So heads down, hands up. So that idea of just focusing on key words. So they put their hand up when they hear the word. And you could do that with anything, with a song or a listening excerpt, a text of some description. Bottle lids are really good. So getting the children to write numbers on bottle lids, and that they could pretend that was their age, and they would then have to say that, whatever number it is. Okay, moving up, if we go through numbers 13 to 31. So if you're going to teach the children how to say the date, you will need all these numbers. So it's likely that won't be until the middle of primary, P4, P5, because probably they're going to do 1 to 10 in P1, 10 to 20 maybe, or 10 to 12, just a revision in P2, and then moving on up slowly, always revising and then adding more to it. So when I'm teaching these numbers, I like to point out or get the children to think about the similarities between numbers 13 to 20, and 1 to 10. So 13 being a long number, 14, 15, 16, they're all quite long compared to the short numbers 1 to 10. We also can hear similarities in the sound. 3 for 3, 13 for 13, 4 for 4, 14 for 14, and on we go. Excuse me. 17, 18, and 19. These three are interesting. You can ask the children to see what numbers they recognize and work it out how they've got there. So for instance, 17 is 10 and 7. How does that make 17? 10 plus 7. So we're using our mental maths here. And 21 up to 29 is just the number 20 plus the other number 2, 3, 4, 5, etc. The only exception is that with 21, you say 20 and 1, as you do for 30 and 1. So that's the only difference. Okay, key pronunciation. Again, focusing on rolling R's. 13, 14, 24. Looking at how we say numbers which have an E after the last consonant. So 14, 14, 15, 16. That pattern, that Z-E. A bit like 16, 15, that teen sound in English that we have, and pattern. Some exceptions, 17, 18, 19. These last letters, the T, we do hear them, even though they've not got that magic E after it that makes us pronounce the letter before, as we had in 14, 15, and 16. Some letters we don't pronounce, like the X, 22, we don't pronounce an X sound. 23, we don't pronounce the S because it's not followed by that magic E afterwards. So just different things for pronunciation for you to know and for you then to share with your learners. A couple of games that you could try with this. By this stage, children hopefully will be starting to read and read familiar and common words. So Duncan's game can be quite good. So the words are on the board as they are here. And the children repeat with you when you say it, if it is the correct word that you are saying. So they're matching up, listening to the word and reading it. So those sounds. So 13, if I do them in order from the top there. 13, 14, 15, 16, 19. That's not the next one. So the children wouldn't repeat that one, whereas they would be saying the previous ones. And then they would get the point if they remembered not to say it. And if not, I would get the point. So it's like a teacher v pupil game. With younger children, you can play the same game, but just with digits, so that they're not reading. We can also look at using dice, whether that be normal dice or whether it be interactive dice online, getting children to add and work out the answer in French, or even multiply as they get older. And if we're using interactive dice, you can have 1, 2, or 3 dice. So can we add them up? Can we even multiply them? So trying to tie in with their maths and what they're learning in maths as well. So on that note, you might want to know the different words. So building on that plus and minus that we had earlier, more and less. So plus, moins, multiplié par, divisé par. Now the words are quite similar to English, so hopefully the children will be able to work those out. But that just shows you how you can progress learning and link in with the maths as well. So as we move through into upper school, we're going to be looking more at reading, developing those other skills, reading and writing. So we can play something like snakes, separate the words, or word snakes. These are quite long for you. With children, you might have fewer words because it's quite a lot. And I would obviously provide support as necessary, whether that be posters with the numbers or a word bank of some description. So have a look and see whether you can work out the pattern, and can you continue it? And then you could create your own. And these would be nice activities to do to consolidate learning, warm up, plenary, homework activities, and children can do them individually or in pairs or in groups, or as a whole class. And they're quite nice because they can be done either out loud, or children can actually write their own individual ones and write the continuation. So then they can be working on writing. Now that might be copying, or it might be writing with support or with no support. So again, you can see how you can progress and do this activity sort of with a multi-composite. So the first one is just going up, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. You can extend it, 11, 12. The second one, 30, 29, 28, 27, 26, we're going down, 25, 24. The third one, 2, 4, 6, 8, 10, 12, 14, 16, 18. We're going up in twos, even numbers, 20 and 22. Number 4, 13, 5, 9, 10, 1, 27, 31. So here we've got odd numbers in any order. So we might have 39, we might have 23. So it's a nice wee activity to do with your class. So if we look at higher numbers now, so here we go. I'll just go over the pronunciation first of all. 0, 10, 20, 30, 40, 50, 60, 70, 80, 90, and 100. So we'll probably be going up to 30 by about P4, 5, and then we'll maybe be looking at the higher numbers after that. So that, doesn't tie in exactly with where they are in their maths, because they probably would have, already covered numbers to 100 before they're in, upper school. But it's something that then they can work on because they know it. They already have that prior learning in English. In terms of patterns, I think it's really important to look at these and try and help them, again, link with literacy and be language detectives. What do we notice? How can we remember them? So if we look at 30 to 60, what do you notice? They all end in that ont sound. 30 is spelled with an E, the other ones are with an A, but it's very similar. We can also see links to 3, 4, 5, 6 as the start of those. 33, 44, etc. Now, 70 to 100 is tricky, so it's worth spending some time on these. So 70, what do we see? 60, 10. How does that make 70? 60 plus 10. It's worth going over that pattern, help the learners to remember it. 80, same thing. What do we see? 4 and 20. How does that make 80? 4 times by 20. And then 90, similarly, would be 4 times 20 plus 10. So stick with the whole numbers, and then once they've got the whole numbers, I'd maybe play bingo with those first of all, and then once they've got them, then start playing around with that a little bit more and looking at 71, 72, 73, etc. So for 71, instead of having 70 plus 1, okay, the other numbers like 31 was 31. Here we're just going to have 71 will be 60 plus 11. 72 will be 60 plus 12. So 71, 70. It's the same pattern for 80 to 90. And we've got 80, we keep that, and we do 81, 82. So that's 4 times 20 plus 1, 2, 3. Then 90, 1, 2, 3, similar to 71. 91 is 91, 4 times 20 plus 11. It's quite complicated, so it's worth spending some time practicing that and learning your numbers, okay? And once you've got them, then obviously with numbers 1 to 100, you can do a lot more of your times table work, multiplying numbers, adding bigger numbers together. And if you're playing bingo, you can get the children, to draw out. This is a bingo with smaller numbers, but they can draw out their own bingo with 4 numbers between 70 to 80, just to practice those numbers. And then you can extend it to 6 numbers and make it a bigger or wider group of numbers, like 70 to 90, for instance. Or you can even do it with sums. So they have to write a sum, and you would say a number, and they have to figure out which sum makes that number. With our dice here, this time using the interactive dice online, or if you've got 3 dice, one can be your hundreds, one can be your tens, and your third one can be your units. So they would be reading the numbers. So 3 dice, you might have 3, 2, and 1. So that would be 300, 300. 20 for your tens would be 2 tens would be 20, 20, and your units would be 1. So 321. It's good to do that in pairs, getting them practicing, rolling the dice and practicing, making sure you've got the numbers on the board to help them with support there. Okay, so we're going to pause there, and you can go to part 2 to look at how we say days of the week. So the main thing is just to practice counting, practice numbers, saying the number of the what date it is, just that number bit in French, and just getting the learners hearing the numbers and saying them as much as they can. Merci, au revoir.